Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. I'm your host, Larry Lease, and on today's episode of Murder Monday, we dive into the Colts Neck Mansion murders. But first, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible is a subscription service that allows you to buy audiobooks that you can listen to from anywhere. Audible allows you to choose from a gigantic array of audiobooks narrated by amazing narrators. Right now, I'm listening to The Dead Zone by Stephen King, narrated by Oscar-winning actor James Franco. It's the chilling story of a high school teacher who falls into a coma and wakes up with psychic abilities. In all seriousness, audiobooks are great for when you're alone and maybe want to stop with the YouTube. So let me ask you this. Do you want a free audiobook of your choice? No purchase necessary? Well, then head on over to audibletrial.com/Larry21 and claim yours today. Go find your next audiobook adventure. And of course, we want to remind you, you can be a part of the show by sending us a voicemail at 682-305-0483. Send us a comment about the case we covered. You can be featured in the next episode. Or just send us a comment about any true crime topic you want to talk about in future episodes, or comments about past or current episodes. So now we dive into today's episode. This is the story of a family business. Well, more than one, in famous Asbury Park, and the story of two houses that were about 20 minutes apart and what happened over the course of 10 hours. This is a story that's literally straight out of The Sopranos, and it's still going on to this day. It is one of those, but there is more than enough to dig into. We're going to jump around a little bit over the course of about 9 to 10 hours back in 2018. But hey, let's set the scene first. The scene being a township called Colts Neck. Why is it called Colts Neck? I don't know. Probably something to do with chopping off heads. I don't know. Let your imagination run wild. Colts Neck, Monmouth County is in central New Jersey. They really love horses there. Bruce Springsteen lives there and has a big old horse ranch. It's a very affluent area with lots of small businesses and no major chains. It's got ranches, and yet it's still less than an hour to New York City. So it really has it all. Back in 2018, it had a house located at 15 Willowbrook Road. When I say house, I mean big fucking mansion. Today, you can purchase the 10 acres it stood on for $1 million. 3 years ago, it was owned by the Caneiros. On the 20th of November 2018 at 12:30 p.m., a 911 call was made to the Monmouth 911 Emergency Services. Firefighters raced over, and on the lawn in front of the house, they found a body. The mansion was engulfed in flames. The fire would take hours to be put out, and the house was completely destroyed. Inside the house were 3 more bodies, eventually identified as the deceased Keith Caneiro, his wife Jennifer, and their 2 kids, Jesse and Sophia. Nothing here was natural, but I guess I didn't really need to say that. Things like this don't just happen in cozy Colts Neck. Oh, what was even more bizarre than the fact that this happened was what happened 7 hours earlier, 20 minutes away. At 27 Tilton Drive, Ocean Township, there was a lovely house, not quite as affluent as Colts Neck, but very nice all the same. At that house lived another Caneiro, Keith's older brother Paul. At about 5 a.m. on the 20th of November 2018, a 911 call was also made from there saying their house was on fire. The Caneiros had some bad luck that day. Paul's fire was a lot less scary, trading a bloody body on the lawn for a dead turtle. The Caneiros were born and raised in Brooklyn. Paul, the oldest, Keith 1 year younger, and a third brother, Corey, 7 years younger than Paul. Paul and Keith were extremely close growing up in Brooklyn and later Staten Island. They would always look out for each other. They would both end up marrying women from Staten Island. Keith would be Paul's best man, and eventually both would end up living only 20 minutes apart from each other and be co-owners of a tech company, Square One, and a pest control company, EcoStar Pest Management. Both operated out of the same building in Asbury Park. Keith was probably the more successful one and the more driven one out of the two. In high school, he worked as a janitor at a computer store, and from there, he would be around computers his entire life. He started a tech consulting company in the 90s, which would later become Square One. It would even be written about in the Asbury Park Press when he went by Keith Martin. That was his middle name. Keith's first hire was his older brother, Paul. The company they ran together was very successful. They eventually decided to purchase a pest control business. They got to diversify. Hey, we use mouses. Why not get paid to kill them? So Paul took over that while Keith stayed in tech. The brothers were doomed. All three of them lived in Jersey. They seemed to be a success story. Things, however, changed in 2012. Paul kind of always had been overshadowed a bit by his younger, more ambitious, more successful brother Keith. Keith had started multiple companies, had a real estate license, just received a master's from Columbia. Paul, he was doing fine, but he was seriously injured in a car accident and would end up in constant pain, needing a shitload of surgeries, and he would have a limp and constant back pain for the rest of his life. It was bad, and things wouldn't ever be the same again. Paul would be very frustrated due to this, and it seemed to cause contention at home. He would move out of the Ocean Township home he shared with his wife and 2 daughters for a time. When I say recently, it was 2018 when he moved back in with them. But they didn't share beds. Keith had recently talked about maybe ending their business partnership. Now, employees at both companies would say they were doing well. It's not like either one was going down the toilet. But Keith seemed like he wanted to end things and move on and do something else. Keith was hoping to end up working at one of the bigger tech companies. Then came November 2018. It seemed like someone wanted to end them both. When firefighters arrived on the 20th of November to Keith's house in Colts Neck, he was found on the lawn. He had been shot once in the lower back and 4 times in the head. Multiple shell casings was found beside him, stamped with GFL 10, 9x19. The firefighters entered the home and found Jesse on the floor of the kitchen. He had been stabbed. Sophia, the youngest, was found on the landing. She too was stabbed. What's really horrific was when these autopsies were done, contributing cause of death for them both was smoke inhalation. So they were alive when they were stabbed. They were alive when the house was on fire. Is what I was trying to say. Jennifer was found on the stairs leading to the basement. She had been shot in the head and stabbed multiple times.
Regretfully, today, I can identify 2 of the 4 bodies that were recovered from the Colts Neck residence, and those are Keith and Jennifer Caneiro, both of which owned and resided that home at 15 Willowbrook in Colts Neck. And today we can tentatively identify the other 2 remains as those of the Caneiro children. The reason why I can't conclusively identify them at this point is because the medical examiner's office continues to do their forensic examination, and because of the condition that 3 of the 4 bodies that were recovered from that home were in because of the fire, that is complicating matters. We expect that information will be confirmed by the medical examiner's office at some point before the end of the day today. The Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office, the Colts Neck Police Department are investigating the Colts Neck matter as a multiple homicide and arson case. Yesterday we specified just arson. The case has transcended into a multiple homicide investigation in addition to the arson matter. And to date, our investigation has revealed that unfortunately, sadly, each of these individuals were the victims of homicidal violence at some point prior to when the fire was set at 15 Willowbrook.
The police then learned something interesting as the investigation began. About 9 hours before they arrived, before the fire was reported at 3 a.m., someone had called 911. This person lived 3.5 miles from Keith's home, and they called because they had heard 5 gunshots. Keith had been shot 5 times. This was approximately at 3:33 a.m. The police arrived at that very cold early morning, but they couldn't find the source of the gunshots. This person who reported the shots wasn't the only one. Another neighbor said they heard them too, 4 to 5 shots, specifically at 3:10. So whatever happened to Keith Caneiro and his family, it looked like someone shot him to death, directly right outside his house at about 3 a.m. Then went inside, shot his wife, and stabbed his 2 kids. Then the fire was started, and it wouldn't be reported for another 9 hours, by which time the whole house was consumed. So what's weird is that 2 hours after we can assume Keith and his family were murdered at 3 a.m., 2 hours after that at 5 a.m., 20 minutes away, Paul's house was set on fire with him and his wife and his 2 kids inside. Then they were contacted by the youngest Caneiro brother, Corey, Well, actually, they were contacted by Corey's wife. They had heard about the fires and called the police and told them they were moving and taking their kids to Pennsylvania. You know, your two brothers' houses get set on fire. Might be a good idea to move away. They went to the grandparents in Pennsylvania. Corey would actually speak to the police and tell them something rather interesting. The day before the fires at about 7 p.m., Keith forwarded an email to his younger brother, Corey. It seemed like he just wanted to keep his younger brother in the loop. The email he forwarded to Corey was one he sent to two of his business associates. In it, Keith wrote that he would not be paying another penny to Paul Caneiro's wife until funds that were missing from the business were accounted for. Keith also wrote that he wanted to sell the business. He was getting frustrated with Paul and the amount of company money Paul was spending. Keith and Paul co-owned Square One. Keith was the majority and Paul was the minority owner. But the pest control company, they owned 50-50. When Paul was in that car accident, he was kind of screwed. So what they did with Paul's salary was pay it to Paul's wife. Therefore, Paul could collect disability while he was still working. Recently, Keith and Paul had been arguing more and more about money. 2 hours after the gunshots were heard in Colts Neck, emergency services arrived on Tilton Drive. There was smoke and a small fire in the rear of the house. The 4 members of Paul's family were there, himself, his wife, and 2 grown daughters. They were sitting in a Porsche Cayenne parked outside. Luckily, no injuries were reported. On the driveway of Paul's house was a red gasoline can, right beside another Porsche which had marks on it, like gasoline spotting marks stains. In a shed at the back of the house, well, there were 3 more gas cans with a space for a 4th one. So things are already looking pretty shitty for Paul. Luckily, we might be able to solve this one without Scooby-Doo, because Paul had surveillance cameras all around his house. So we can just see what really happened. Paul was like, yeah, review the footage. Oh, yeah, I might have turned off the recorder earlier because it's slowing down my Wi-Fi. Yeah, you haven't heard that one before. The affidavit said the cameras were hardwired, so they wouldn't use the internet. Paul must have forgot that, and that's why he turned them off. The footage showed that about 1:30 a.m. on the 28th, Paul walked into the garage to the DVR system, turned it off, so the system would stop recording. The fire investigators quickly determined there was arson done by a dumbass. The police spoke to Paul's wife. She said she just woke up in the middle of the night to the smoke alarm. Her and Paul had been sleeping in different beds. Remember, they weren't on the best of terms lately. She presumed all the footage was still recording. She had no idea Paul had turned anything off. So when the alarm went off, the family left the home. Paul took a Porsche out of the garage and they all got in, waiting for the fire trucks. So obvious what happened, but the investigators were looking around. Now Paul's CCTV was turned off, but oh no, a neighbor hadn't turned their CCTV off that night. It showed a white SUV believed to be a Porsche, and Paul owned 2 Porsche SUVs driving toward Green Grove Road at 2:07 a.m. from the direction of Paul's home. That road is the main one. It can take you anywhere, including Colts Neck. That SUV came back driving towards Paul's house at 4:08 a.m. The house behind Paul's also had CCTV and determined that the car came and went from exactly Paul's house. So at 2 a.m., a car leaves Paul's house. At 3 a.m., 3 gunshots are heard in Colts Neck. At 4 a.m., the car comes back to Paul's house. At 5 a.m., Paul's house fire starts. And then at 12 p.m., the fire is discovered in Colts Neck. Canines alerted them to an accelerant found around the scene of the fire. They got a search warrant and searched one of the Porsches. Inside, they found parts of a 9mm handgun, a suppressor, and night vision, thermal vision attachment for a firearm. On the 23rd, they searched the inside of the house and found a safe. Inside were multiple guns, ammo with the head stamp GFL 10 9x19. Sound familiar? Beside the location where the fire had been started was a plastic container. You know, whoever started the fire hoped the fire would destroy the container. Nope. Inside the container was bloody clothing, which was taken for testing, and the blood was tested and determined to be 8-year-old Sophia Caneiro's. Paul was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder, 1 count of aggravated arson, and 2 other lesser weapons charges.
Specifically, we allege that the defendant repeatedly shot and killed his brother while he was outside of the side of his home, and then moved to murder the rest of the family inside the home. We allege that Jennifer was shot and stabbed, and the 2 Caneiro children were repeatedly stabbed by knife. We also allege that after murdering the Caneiro family, the defendant then set fire to the house at 15 Willowbrook in Colts Neck in an effort to conceal and disguise his earlier committed crimes.
Employees saw Paul the day before all this happened on the 19th of November. They said he was acting fine. Nothing weird about him. He was normal, buried in his iPod all day. Nothing else has really come out about this case. It was supposed to go to trial in 2021. Paul was also charged with getting disability while working, and that could be 10 years alone if convicted. Also, Keith's wife Jennifer and her father filed a wrongful death suit against Paul. In it, he alleges that Paul also stole $90,000 from Keith. Keith and his wife had discovered about 6 months before their deaths that Paul was taking money from college funds that were set up for their 2 children, Jesse and Sophia. Paul was taking it and putting it into funds for his own children, a total of $90,000. Paul apparently wanted to set it up to make it look like he was a victim too. And shockingly, he ended up pleading not guilty. Leave a comment in the comment section below. What did you think about the Colts Neck Mansion murders? Have you heard of it before? Do you have any thoughts about it? Let's hear your theories on why you think Paul did it. And of course, if you want to support the show, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, pay them, pay our writers, and take the show on the road. We'd love to live stream from true crime locations, either Florida, other parts of Texas that I live nearby, California, and hopefully one day, maybe overseas. Your support can help make that happen. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time.